Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another Talmud class that we have each and every Thursday night. And this is a special Purim series, part 1 of 4, that we are going to be doing from now until Purim. We had just passed the 14th and the 15th of Adar number 1. It's a leap year, and we celebrated Purim and Shushan Purim Katan, we called it, the small Purim, the Shushan Purim. This is the day of Purim where we would usually celebrate that holiday if it weren't a leap year, but because it's a leap year, it's been pushed off. However, as we had said before, the month of Adar, which has been doubled, automatically means that we need to increase in joy, double measure. And this is especially true when we reach that milestone of a Purim Katan, a small Purim, and we enter that phase where we are definitely within the 30 days before Purim. So this is the holiday season. This is the holiday season. Think about it this way. We are entering a 4-part series from now until Purim. And right after Purim, we immediately speak about Passover. It's within 30 days before Passover. So these 2 months from now until Passover, this is the holiday theme. So we are starting, this week is the 4-part series on Purim. Special about Purim. I want to thank the sponsor. It is anonymous, but those of you who are watching live, you cannot smell it. It's delicious. And delicious refreshments. I want to thank everybody who are here for coming, and those who are watching on live, and people already starting to watch. We are going to be discussing the theme of tonight's class is the Jew who wouldn't bow. We are going to be entering directly into the story of Purim, and the emphasis that we are going to stress on tonight, as well as over the next 3 weeks after this, is that the story of Purim is not just something that occurred in the past, but is relevant to 2019. It's relevant to us today. And when we look into the insights, when you look into the story of Purim, you'll see how the sequence of events and the secrets behind the different actions of the heroes of old are really relevant to us today. And for that reason, I want to start off. For those of you with the handouts, you look at the source sheet number 1. Before we start going into the story of Purim, I want to, for all of us, let's read together the famous saying of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. He says as follows, source 1, HaKairis HaMegillah L'Mafreya Lo Yatsa. One who reads the Megillah L'Mafreya, which means in retrospect, but it is translated and interpreted to mean out of sequence. One who reads the Megillah out of sequence has not fulfilled his obligation. This is a teaching from the Mishnah, which is the written oral law of the Torah, and this is a teaching, and this is the rule. The rule is one must read the Megillah in order, in sequence of events. And one cannot start off chapter 1 and then skip to chapter 4, come back to chapter 3, go to chapter 8. The Megillah must be read in sequence. So much so that if one had not read the Megillah in sequence, he had not fulfilled the obligation. Why is it? So, the commentaries explain this ruling. The reason being is because the entire story of Purim, not once is God's name mentioned. And so one may think, it gives room for people to think that because God's name is not mentioned in the Megillah, it opens room for us to begin believing that perhaps the entire miracle of Purim is not really a miracle at all. It was just a coincidence. Just one thing happened to happen one after the other, and there was no divinity in it. There was no supernatural power. However, if one reads it in sequence and they see step by step by step, and they see how everything is interconnected, as we will see, as we will demonstrate part of it tonight's class, one will see that really the entire story is truly the hand of God, every step of the way. So that is the teaching of the Mishnah. Comes along the Baal Shem Tov, but he gives us another interpretation. Something which really touches to the core of every Jewish holiday, and that is, quote, Shekasher Kairis HaMegillah, says the Baal Shem Tov, that when someone reads the Megillah, ba'ayfen, in a manner, shechayshev shezel mu'ur she'ira ba'avar. What does it mean, someone that reads the Megillah limafreya? Again, the literal translation of limafreya means in retrospect, in hindsight. If someone reads the Megillah in hindsight, the Baal Shem Tov says, yes, exactly. If someone reads the Megillah in hindsight, meaning that he or she who reads the Megillah thinks that this is only reading a story of an occurrence that happened in the past, limafreya, in hindsight, meaning if a Jew thinks that the reading of the Megillah is only to commemorate something that happened 2,500 years ago, azai lo yatsa, then he has not fulfilled the obligation, meaning he had lost the whole point. He or she had lost the whole point. Why? Kiven shehatayra hi nitzchas, being that the Torah is eternal. So the message of Purim, based on the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, and we can apply this to every Jewish holiday, because why do we really celebrate any Jewish holiday? What is the point of these holidays? It's not just a commemoration. Each and every holiday and festival we celebrate, we commemorate in Judaism, has a life message that's applicable today. So the Baal Shem Tov is telling us that with that strong message. Learn the story of Purim. Understand the Megillah. Understand the story, because this is a story of 2019. This is not a story of days bygone. So with that approach and that perspective, this is what the Baal Shem Tov is guiding us in entering into the class. We will now appreciate tonight and the following 3 weeks in understanding the different parts of the Megillah. I'm not going to, with that being said, let's go right into the story. I want to mention a disclaimer. I'm not going to go through the entire story with you. I'm not. In fact, I'm going to choose 3 pieces, 3 segments I'm going to pull out of the Megillah over the next 3 weeks. Because in truth, the story has layer upon layer of secrets. It doesn't end. It's never ending. We can just dig deeper and deeper and deeper. So I've chosen 3 themes, 3 segments. I'm going to pull 3 episodes taken out of the whole entire story of Purim that I'm going to focus on with you. So we are going to take we're going to choose an episode tonight that is already in chapter 3. There are 10 chapters altogether in the Megillah. I'm going to start already in chapter 3. Of course, to do that, I'm going to give a little bit of background. It's not going to take too long. A little background from the beginning of the Megillah, the beginning of the story, all the way till chapter 3. And then we're going to jump right in. The sequence. It came to pass about 70 years after the destruction of the first Holy Temple, when all the Jews, primarily over the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, the tribes of Yehuda and Binyamin, they were exiled to ancient Babylon, Bavel, present-day Iraq, Iran, Syria, the entire area, the Babylonian Empire. There were 12 tribes altogether. 10 of them were taken under King Sancherib. They were taken. There are 10 lost tribes, as you may know. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it later. And there were 2 tribes primarily of Binyamin and Yehuda, Benjamin and Judah, that they were exiled to Babylon. And 70 years after that arose a king. This was King Achashverosh, that was his name. Originally a stable boy, working in the stables of the King Belshazzar, a previous Persian king. The Persian Empire had taken over the Babylonian Empire. King Achashverosh, he was a stable boy, but eventually fought his way to power and seized the throne. And he, according to some commentaries, ruled the entire world. He was the superpower. There was not a single piece of land in the entire civilized world at that time that was not under his rule. And he wanted to strengthen the empire. He wanted to gather everybody in and to unite the empire. Specifically, he was targeting the Jew. Why? Because he had a tradition based on all the Persian kings in the coming from King Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, who had first exiled the Jews into Babylon, there was a tradition that the second temple, there was a prophecy, the second temple was going to be rebuilt after 70 years of exile. And King Ahasuerus was very, very paranoid, because during his rule, on the third year of his rule, after ruling for just 2 years, that was the year that the official 70-year exile had completed, or so he thought. He had erred in his calculations. He thought that the 70 years of exile was up, and when it was up, and he saw that he still had an iron rule over every single one of his constituents, on top of all of his subjects, including the Jewish people. For him, that was a reason to celebrate. He made a huge feast. It lasted for 6 months, 180 days. He invited the entire empire over. He threw a lavish feast. After that, he threw a 7-day feast. After that, for the capital city of Shushan, he made sure that all the Jews were invited. All of them were given kosher food. We're gonna point that out later on when we're speaking about this. And he got everyone involved. Mordechai was the Rebbe, was the Grand Rabbi at the time. He was the leader. And he told everybody not to go to the feast, not to partake. Many Jews listened to him. Some Jews did not. Not everybody disagreed with Mordechai, but some people did. They went to the feast. They saw all kinds of things. We're not going to delve into the story too much. And what happened was, after 7 days of drinking straight, Ahasuerus is dead drunk, and he calls his wife Vashti to come out without clothing. She refuses. The whole story associated with that. Ahasuerus is insulted. He decides to consult his advisors, and there's an advisor, Memuchan, and he advises the king to execute Vashti. Vashti gets executed. Again, I'm not going to go into the details. Vashti is executed. This causes Ahasuerus to want a new queen. It takes 4 years altogether. Eventually, Ahasuerus chooses Esther. Esther is chosen to become the queen. She, in fact, was a cousin. She, in fact, was a cousin to Mordechai. Some say she was even Mordechai's wife. That's some opinions. That's the opinions the Talmud brings it. And she becomes the queen. She was in constant contact with Mordechai, who was her cousin / husband. Some people say husband. And she kept in contact with him the entire time. Comes an episode, and there were 2 guards to the king's palace, Bigsan and Seresh, and they tried to poison the king. They tried to talk in their native in their native language of Tarshish. Mordechai, who was part of the high supreme Jewish court, the Sanhedrin, was very well versed with all 70 languages. Every single member of the Sanhedrin had to know all 70 languages. And so Mordechai was very well versed in the language Tarshish. He therefore understood every single thing that they were saying. He immediately gave the news over to Esther to tell the king that Bigsan and Seresh were trying to poison him, to kill him. Ahasuerus got wind of it, and Mordechai saved the king's life through Esther, Queen Esther. It was documented that Mordechai saved the king's life, and Esther had a role to play. That is chapter 1 and chapter 2. Now, we enter chapter 3. So, in order to introduce ourselves to chapter 3, we need to describe the 2 main characters of our story that we're going to discuss tonight. The 2 main characters are Mordechai HaTzadik, Mordechai the Tzaddik, the righteous person. He was the Rebbe, the leader of all the Jewish people at that time. And then there was a person called Haman. So, let's talk about these 2 characters. And we will start with Mordechai, because he was mentioned first. We passed over him very, very quickly. He was first mentioned in chapter 2. Where is he mentioned? Chapter 2, the 5th verse. Source sheet, source number 2. Ish Yehudi Haya b'Shushan Habira. In the city of Shushan, there was a Jew, Ushemai, and his name Mordechai, ben Yair, ben Shim'i, ben Kish, Ish Yemini. His name is Mordechai. He's the son of Yair. By the way, we skip a few generations now. Ben Shimi, the son of Shimi. Skip another 2 generations. Ben Kish, Ish Yemini. He's a man of Yemini, the right hand. So, first of all, right away you see in the verse, we give Mordechai 2 different titles. He is Yehudi and Yemini. Now, what is Yemini? So if you see in the English over here loosely translates it to Benjaminite, which is accurate. Yemini, the right hand, is referring to Benjamin, the youngest of the 12 sons, the 12 tribes, and his name Ben Yamin, the son of my right hand, as Jacob called him. The whole story associated with that. But we also call him Yehudi. Now Yehudi, what's the name Yehudi? A Jew, loosely translated, but not really loosely translated. Yehudi comes from the word Yehuda. Yehuda is a different tribe altogether. So is Mordechai, is he a descendant of Yehuda or is he a descendant of Binyamin? Which tribe does he come from? The verse says both. Ish Yehudi, etc. Shmai Mordechai, his name is Mordechai, etc., etc. Ish Yemini. So is he a Yehudi? Is he a Yemini? Is he from the tribe of Judah? Is he from the tribe of Benjamin? Where does he come from? So before we jump into that, I want to quote to you something very, very fascinating. There's a fascinating commentary on the Megillah. It's called Targum Sheni. Now there's a Targum. Targum means interpretation or translation, given by Onkelos. Now Onkelos has a whole story of its own. A nephew of a Roman emperor who converted to Judaism was almost killed for it, and was eventually left alone by his uncle through wit and wisdom. If you want to know who Onkelos is, Google him. We're not going to talk about him too much. So that is usually found, if you open up any text of the Tanakh, the writings, the prophets, you'll usually see his interpretation on the inside, insert on the inside of the page next to the main verses. It's in Aramaic. However, there's what we call Targum Sheni. Targum Sheni is a continuation, and it's much more at length. And it's based a lot on the Medrash, and it gives us a lot of beautiful insights. And so, believe it or not, Targum Sheni actually gives us the full lineage of Mordechai. So we're finding the page. Here we are. It tells us, Dain hu gava Mordechai. There was a man, Mordechai, ben Yair, ben Shimi, bar Shmida, bar Bana, bar Ela, bar Micha, bar Mephibosheth, bar Shaul. It gives us every single name, and altogether, by the way, there are 18 generations altogether. It gives us name by name, father to son. Mordechai, he was the son of Yair, the son of Shimi, the son of Shmida, the son of Bana, the son of Ela, the son of Micha, the son of Mephibosheth. If you know a little bit of history, Mephibosheth was the son of King Saul, Shaul HaMelech, and yes, his father's Shaul. And Shaul was Shaul ben Kish. So now when we see the verse, Ish Yehudi, Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimi ben Kish, we see there are a few generations that were skipped. But the point is that Mordechai is a descendant of Shaul. And Targum Sheni keeps going, telling us the full lineage all the way to Yaakov. All the way. And it keeps going. After Shaul, ben Kish, ben Aviel, ben Surah, ben Boichras, ben Afiel, ben Shcharim, etc., 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 etc. And it keeps going another 10, 15 generations. Ben Gera, ben Bela, ben Binyamin, the son of Yaakov. So it gives us the complete lineage. Now, before we continue, I just want to point out, we mentioned Mordechai HaTzadik. He's called Mordechai, the righteous person. There's someone else in the Torah that's given the title Tzadik. Yosef. Who is Yosef? Benjamin's older brother. In fact, from all the other brothers, they were brothers from the same mother, Rachel, Rachel. And as we delve deeper and deeper into the discussion tonight, we are going to see, we're actually going to draw a lot of parallels between Yosef and Mordechai, who is a descendant of Binyamin. So this is Binyamin versus Yosef, Benjamin versus Joseph, the two brothers. And we're going to see how the Talmud and the commentaries draw a lot of parallels between them and compares one to the other, and basically demonstrating to us how the highlight of the story of Purim is all about the characteristics of Benjamin over Joseph, over Yosef. Okay, so back to our question. So clearly, based on the Targum Sheni, we define this very, very clearly, that Ish Yemini was his true ancestry. He was a descendant of Binyamin. So why was he called Yehudi? So, this is a Talmud class. The Talmud gives us the answer. The Talmud gives us the answer. You have it on source number 3, and it's on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, page 13, side A, in the Talmud tractate Megillah. An entire tractate of Talmud dedicated to the Megillah and to the reading of Purim, which is a fascinating tractate. Honestly, I'm totally up to doing tractate Megillah after we complete tractate Brachos, whenever we finish that, where we're on our way. So, says the Talmud about Mordechai. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, Rabbi Yochanan says, La'ela mi Binyamin ka'asi. It's always been that Mordechai descends from Binyamin. V'amai kari leili Yehudi. Why is he called Yehudi? Ish Yehudi, which seems to imply he's coming from Benjamin. Al Shum because, I'm sorry, Yehuda, yeah, from Judah. Al Shum because shekafar ba'avodah zara, because he defied idol worship, idolatry, and says the Talmud, shekol hakofer ba'avodah zara, whoever defies idol worship, nikra Yehudi, is called a Yehudi, is called a Jew. Kediksiv, as the verse says, isi goyven Yehudayin, as it says, there are certain Jews, and Taisus over here explains, and I've added that in as the English translation over here. Who are we talking about? We're talking about Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These are 3 famous characteristics in the book of Daniel, and they were ministers of the king Nebuchadnezzar, who were in charge of the provinces of Babylonia, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they were also Pushkaim Teshav. They also defied idol worship. They defied everything. There's a whole famous story about them. You can read about it. They were thrown into the fiery furnace and they survived. They were also called Ish Yehudi. What is the emphasis? The point is that they did not come from tribe of Judah either. They also did not, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah also did not come from the tribe of Judah. However, they were also given the title Ish Yehudi. Just explains the Talmud. The term Yehudi is all about standing up for what's right and defying idolatry. And this is the main point that we're driving at, as we will see later, as we continue on in this class. We will see that this is the main point and subject about Mordechai. Okay. This is what the Talmud says, and in source number 4, the Medrash Rabbah, Esther Rabbah, Vav, Perek Vav, Pasuk Beis, says the same thing and elaborates a little bit more. Ish Yehudi Ayub Shushan Abira, Lama Nikra Shema Yehudi. This is source number 4. Why was he called the Judean if he was from Benjamin? Bala Yaminihu, isn't he from the tribe of Binyamin? Lafi Sheyichad Shemay Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu Keneged Kol Ba'er Elam, because he attested to the unity of God in the entire world. Hadao D'chsiv, this is what the verse says, La Yichrav Le'ishtachava, that he did not bow or prostrate himself. So now, we understand Mordechai. This gives us the background of Mordechai. So he is a descendant of Binyamin, and he exemplifies. He is all about the tribe of Benjamin, the tribe of Binyamin. This is what he is there for. Now, based on the Targum Sheni, especially the fact that we called Mordechai the son of Kish. Who was Kish? He was the father of Shaul HaMelech, King Saul. So there are two aspects that we are pointing out in this verse. Three, actually. The fact that Mordechai was a descendant of King Shaul. The fact that he was a descendant of the tribe of Benjamin, direct descendant of Binyamin. And the fact that he was a Yehudi Jew. The fact that he was a Yehudi. How do we define a Yehudi? Based on the Talmud, it no longer is just on someone who is a tribe from the tribe of Yehuda. Now everyone is called Yehudi, anyone who stands up and defies idolatry and stands up for what's right. By the way, this is the origin of the word Jew. What is the word Jew? The word Jew, what is it? It is made up from the Hebrew letter Yud. Now, the Hebrew letter Yud is the first letter of the word Yehuda, Yehudi, a Jew. You may understand now why the Jewish people in Europe, especially in Germany, what title were we given? A Yud, Juden. That's what a Yud, a Jew. Or in Polish, a Yid, Yidden, or a Yid. A Yid, or in Germany, a Yud, Juden. So Yud, we were called Jewish. In French, a Juif, it's the same thing. It's all about the letter Yud. Because nowadays we are all coined by that term Yud, Jew. That's pretty much where it's coming from. So we are all called Yehudim today. So therefore this is talking to us. Because if the nations are calling us a Yehudi, we have to understand what is a Yehudi. What does it mean to be a Yehudi? So this is absolutely talking to us today. And especially with the rise of anti-Semitism, unfortunately, in Europe, and we see it. And by the way, in the United States as well, it's important for us to understand what approach we should take when it comes to standing up for being a Jew. Where do we learn it from? Mordechai. Let's see. Mordechai is defying idolatry. Against who? On this, we introduce our second primary character in our story. And that is the opening verse of chapter 3. Achar hadvarim ha'ela. After these things. After these events. Gidal hamelech Achashverosh. King, how do you pronounce this in English? Ahasuerus? Something like that. Achashverosh promoted Haman, Gidal HaMelech Achashverosh, as Haman ben Hamdasa, the son of Hamdasa, Ho'agagi, the Agagite. Vayunaseu, and he advanced him, he raised him up. Vayasem es Kisai, and he raised his seat, he seated him higher. Me'al kol hasarim, from all the other officials asher itay that were with him. Okay, so Haman also gets a few titles. He is Ben Hamdasa, the son of Hamdasa, Ha'agagi, the Agagite. And then, another thing that happens in this verse is that he seems to be promoted a few times. First, it's Gidal, raised him up. Then it's Vayinasehu, then he was raised again. And then Vayasem es Kisai, his seat is placed, Me'al kol hasarim, from all the officials that were with him. That's 3 promotions in one verse. So we need to understand this. So we explained Mordechai, let's explain Haman. Let's go back to Targum Sheni. Gives us a little bit of an insight. And I'm also going to quote a few others that are going to give us a good background as to all these people. Haman. First of all, who is this Haman? What does it mean, Achar hadvar ma'ila, after these events? After what? I mean, if you look at every single verse in the Megillah, it's very cryptic. There's a lot of gray here. a lot of open-ended questions which don't seem to be answered. So with and that's what I'm saying, the story of Megillah, layer upon layer, we can go really, really deep with the story because there's just so much that we can talk about. After how many events? After what events? This is the opening chapter. After these events, after which events? Yidal HaMelech, the king raised Haman. Who's Haman? After he raised him again. He raised his chair. What does that mean? From all the other officers who were with him. What does that mean? So, before we get into the commentary to explain who Haman was, I want to introduce to you a Talmud. The Talmud is on the next page, Yud Gimel Amud Beis, source number 6. Talmud actually asks this very question. Achar hadvar ma'ela, after these events, after what events? After what events? And what does it mean? What does it mean that the Megillah has to say this after these events and only afterwards introduce us Haman? Why is this an introduction? Why are these the opening words to Haman being promoted? Says the Talmud, Achar hadvar ma'ela, after these events, Achar mai, after what? Says the Talmud, Amarava, Achar shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu refuah lemaka. After the Holy One, blessed be He, created a remedy for the blow, a remedy before the blow. And I'm quoting outside of this, Medrash Rabbah, which is not over here, but I'm going to explain outside. The Medrash Rabbah goes much further and says to us that unlike the nations of the world, the Jewish people are always given a full remedy before we get hit with something. The remedy to wherever the sickness is, or whatever tragedy strikes, we are always given the remedy for it in advance. The nations of the world, continues the Medrash Rabbah, are given the opposite treatment, whereas they are given the attack. They are given the attack. The attack strikes them, and the remedy only comes later on, if it ever arrives. If it ever arrives. The Jewish people are always given the remedy before the strike. So therefore, Achar hadvar ma'ela, after these events, after all the events that occurred until now, which was the remedy before the strike. Okay, so let's understand what happened. We need to understand, explains the Ibn Ezra, source number 7, that Achar, after these events, is Achar Chamesh Shanim, source number 7. 5 years later. 5 years later. We must understand the entire story of Megillah. If the Balkari, if the one reading the Megillah is fast enough, he does it in under 15 minutes. But that does not mean that the story happened in less than a year. The story of the Megillah actually occurred over a lengthy period of time. We must understand the Jews living in Persia for a long, long time. Achashverosh was already through this party in the 3rd year of his reign. 3rd year of his reign. He began looking for a wife. If you look in the words of the Megillah, which I'm going to help you by doing it for you, it actually says, when was Esther crowned? Bishnas Sheva L'Malchusay, in the 7th year of his reign. 4 years in. So he threw the party in his 3rd year. He crowns Queen Esther in the 7th year. Now 5 years have passed after that. And now Haman gets promoted. 5 years later. 5 years after what? So we gave our introduction to this episode saying that Haman, who was Memuchan, he was Memuchan, which is source number 8. Again, quoting another Megillah, another Talmud. Vayomer Memuchan, Tana Memuchan ze Haman. Says the Talmud, Haman was really Memuchan. Lama nikra shmei Memuchan. Why was he called Memuchan? Shemuchan l'Puranius, because he had prepared himself. He was prepared to bring calamity. Now, he has prepared himself for calamity, to cause calamity on the Jewish people. But you can also translate Mochan L'Puranius. He prepared himself for calamity. He set himself up without realizing it. Amar Rav Kana Mikansha Hedjek Kaifetz Barosh. Says Rav Kana, from here we learn that common man jumps to the front and speaks first. Because again, who was Memuchan? There were 7 advisors to the king. Kar Shana Shesar Admasa Sarshish Meres Marsan Memuchan. 7 advisors. And Memuchan was mentioned last. He was on the back bench. And a common person usually does not know proper etiquette. Usually the rule is that someone who is above you speaks first. And Memuchan did not wait, and he spoke up. But if you look at the entire sequence of events, how was Haman promoted? He was promoted because of Esther. It was Esther's fault that he was promoted in a good way. Think about it. Why was Haman promoted? Haman was not someone who was Memuchan. He was on the backbench as a minister. He did not deserve any promotions. He was not there he wasn't going to achieve any high official title. However, after 5 years, this is based on the Medrash and the commentaries. After 5 years, after Achashverosh wrote down in Chronicles that Mordechai saved the king's life, and after 5 years living with the new queen, Esther, Achashverosh, explain the commentaries, was a very paranoid man. Very paranoid. He was very paranoid about the 70 years of the exile being up. So a king who is that paranoid would not want any good deed to go unrewarded. Would not want any good deed to go unrewarded. Now over here, he celebrated the fact that Vashti is gone and he has a beautiful new queen, Esther. Who gets the credit for that? Who gets the credit for that? Esther, really. Esther should get the credit for it. And in fact, it doesn't even make sense that Haman should get promoted. Because he, after all, was the one that asked for Vashti to be killed. He had nothing to do with Esther. But because the king abruptly decided that Haman gets promoted, for what? For suggesting Vashti to be killed, that resulted in Queen Esther being the new queen. So Ahasuerus decided Haman should be promoted. Now, this gets even more strange. Because what happens in the sequence of the Megillah right before we talk about Haman for the first time? Bigsan and Seresh. Bigsan and Seresh wanted to poison the king. The king's life was saved. From who? Esther. Esther told him the news. Who told Esther? Mordechai. Who is written down in the Chronicles as saving the king's life? Mordechai and Esther. So who's the king reward? Haman. Haman got promoted again. This is very, very strange. Haman got promoted again out of gratitude to the fact that it was Queen Esther who told the king that Bigsan and Seresh wanted the poison. How was Esther queen in the first place? Haman. So Haman should get promoted again. Something doesn't make sense over here. Something doesn't add up. The only way that this could be understood is the Bir Hagra. There is, from the Vilna Gaon, a very, very big genius who lived about 300 years ago. He gives us something very, very fascinating, which can explain why some Megillas are written in a certain format. And he says to us as follows. He says to us, Gidal HaMelech, that the king raised, the king promoted. Says the Bir Hagra something very interesting, and some of you may know this concept already. Shemelech stam hu HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every single time the word king is mentioned in the Megillah, it's a metaphor for the Holy One, blessed be He. And even if it says HaMelech HaChashverosh, you should know, says the Bir Hagra, you should know that even when the story tells us that Achashverosh is doing an action, it's not really his action, it's God planting thoughts in his head. So this explains everything. When you peel all the layers away, the decision of Achashverosh to promote Haman makes absolutely no sense. If there's anybody that should be promoted, it should be Mordechai. In fact, all these 5 years, based on the Medrash Rabbah, 5 years passed. After all these 5 years, that the king was paranoid that he needs to pay back and reward somebody for saving his life, after 5 years he came to the conclusion, Haman, clearly this is not a rational thinking. So this gives us another understanding of what is going on. Okay, let's keep going. Wow. Let's keep going. I'm realizing now I can turn this into a 3-part series by itself. So, the king promotes Haman. Who is Haman? Ben Hamdasa ha-Agagi, the Agagite. Who is he? Who is this Agagi? Explains the Targum Sheni, again, gives us insight again. Who is he? He is a direct descendant of King Agag, who is a direct descendant of Amalek. And Amalek is a grandson of Esav. Targum Sheni goes all the way back to Esav. It tells us over here. Yes. Haman bar Amdasa Agagi bar Sarach bar Buza bar Toloitas bar Diyosef bar Diyosim bar Priyom bar Madi bar Blokim bar Nantimris bar Pinyon, etc., etc., bar Parmashta bar Vaizasa bar Amalek. Amalek had a son Vaizasa. Interesting. Haman had a son Vaizasa. Vaizasa had a son Parmashta. By the way, Haman had another son Parmashta. So now we know where the names are coming from. He's naming them after his own ancestors, who are Amalek's children. And Amalek is Bar Chenasa de Eliphaz. He's the son of Eliphaz, who we know is the son of Esav. So Targum Sheni is pointing out to us, drilling it into us. You should know Haman is the descendant of King Agag, who is a descendant of Amalek, who is a descendant of Esav. He wants us to know Esav. Hopefully, if we get there, we can explain again, why are we emphasizing that Mordechai is from Binyamin, the son of Rachel, the brother of Yosef? Why is Haman being emphasized as a descendant of Amalek, who's a descendant of Esav? We have to, hopefully we might get there if we have time. So, Haman, he's a descendant of Agag. Agagite. Who is this Agag? Back to the story of King Shaul. Now we see the connection with Mordechai. King Shaul was the very first Jewish king. And one of the 3 commandments of a Jewish king is you need to wipe out Amalek. You need to wipe out the nation of Amalek. So King Shaul endeavored to do that, and he failed. He failed because he let the king of Amalek live. The king, a mass murderer, a Mengele, an Eichmann of his time, a Hitler of his time, a mass murderer of many, many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. This King Agag, a monster. King Shaul failed, let him live, because he felt some sort of, one royalty to another, felt he'll let him live. It came that the prophet Samuel, Shmuel, had to come himself. He was the one who executed King Agag, the king of Amalek. However, in that interim time that Agag was in jail, somehow he managed to build a relationship with a mistress, and she conceived. He was executed the next day, and she somehow escaped, carrying an embryo of a child of King Agag. Who was this child? Vaizasa. Vaizasa had a son, Parmashta. Father and son, child after child, going all the way down till Haman. Haman is the direct descendant of King Agag, who should have been wiped out. The Talmud actually jumps on this and says something very, very fascinating. It says to us...
Did you say it was not even his queen, it was a mistress?
Say it again?
Did you say it was a mistress?
A mistress.
It wasn't even his queen.
The queen was executed. Everybody was executed. The entire nation was executed except King Agag himself.
And the mistress?
The mistress was someone that he met in jail.
Right.
And conceived the night before he was executed by the prophet Shmuel. So, on this, the Megillah, and on this, the Talmud actually does not hold back from pointing out. Where was it? I lost the exact spot. I'm sorry. I'll just say it outside. Where the Talmud basically draws a parallel, saying, look at the difference between the descendants of Binyamin and the descendants of Binyamin and the descendants of Yehuda. No, I'm going to skip this because I don't have the words in front of me, and I'd rather say something accurate than to say something. Okay, maybe a different time. But we continue going. Thank you. But we continue going. Okay, so says the Bir Hagra. I'm gonna start moving things along. Says the Bir Hagra. Says the explanation of the Bir Hagra. In every single system, even in the system of Haman, as fast and as rapid as it seems, he was still promoted in steps. You see, King Achashverosh, as much as he was a monarch, and as much as he was a superpower with an iron fist and had ultimate control, he still had a parliament. Now, in the United States, the way the government works is different. We have three branches of government. You have the legislative, you have the executive, you have the judicial. Yeah, you got the Supreme Court, you got the White House, you got the Congress. So therefore, there's checks and balances. That's the way of government working in the United States in general. If you look at different countries that still follow the model of a monarch, that have a parliament, say the United Kingdom, Britain, and therefore Australia, Canada, that still follow the British model, they have something called a parliament. In the parliament, that there are some similarities, like in the United States government you have Congress and you have the Senate, Congress people and you have the senators. So over there in the British model, I know this because I'm originally from Australia, they have something called the House of Commons and you have the House of Lords. The same idea. You have like the Congress people and you have the House of Lords, which is sort of like the senators, but it does run differently because it is something. The House of Commons is something that is elected by everybody, whereas the House of Lords, which is the equivalent of the Senate, I guess, is that they are appointed. The idea of the Parliament is that you have a king or queen, and then you have a prime minister. A prime minister is somebody that is given the chair. What does it mean, given the chair? Not the electric chair. Is given the chair, meaning that if you ever looked at what one of these parliaments look like, there's a coalition, there's a party, and the party appoints a head, and the head of the party is the prime minister. They are all ministers in the room, and the prime minister is the head of the party. Now, effectively, the prime minister governs the land. Effectively. However, everything ultimately is upon the decision and the approval of the monarch. So technically, let's say in England, the prime minister, they do legislation. The prime minister leads the parliament in deciding in legislation and deciding in the governing of the land. And then on every little decision, he visits the queen. Why? Go sit in the back. I'm kidding. And they don't see you, don't worry. And ultimately, the prime minister has to go to the king or the queen and get the stamp of approval. This is the same with Haman. Haman starts off on the back bench, is in the House of Commons, makes it to the House of Lords, goes rank by rank, becomes the head of the party, eventually the head of the prime minister. So this is the Bir Hagra that tells us that whenever it says Vayigdal, it says Hoylech v'gadol, has to be step by step. So that's why it says Gidal HaMelech, the king raised, and then it says Vayinaseu, and raised him up again from minister to cabinet. And then Vayosem es kisay me al kol asarim. He raised his chair above all the others. He had the biggest seat. His seat was raised above all of them. What was unique about Haman, which was under a true monarch, Achashverosh, who had true control, is that he had full control over everything. Now, does that mean that Achashverosh did not have control? Yeah, he definitely had control. He could do whatever he wanted. But Achashverosh is not interested in governing the land. He's not interested in deciding what day the garbage collectors are arriving. Leaves that to the prime minister. Leaves that to the legislature. So King Achashverosh also had a parliament. And he put Haman in charge of his parliament. He was the prime minister. But because Achashverosh only really cared about things that mattered to him, like, for example, spending 4 years looking for a queen. But when it comes to something on, road repairs, leave that to Haman. Haman really had full control. And as we know in the story, control to the point that he was able to decide life and death. He had real power. How was he able to harness this power? He was able to convince the king something very, very, really, really dangerous. What was that dangerous thing that he was able to convince the king? Was that he was able to convince the king that the Chol Avdei HaMelech, this is source number 9, the Chol Avdei HaMelech Asher B'Shah HaMelech, verse number 2 of chapter 3, that all the servants of the king in the palace, that were in the palace gate, this is referring to all the ministers as well, they all need to bow and prostrate before Haman, because this is what the king had commanded. Mordechai, he will not bow down, he will not prostrate himself. With this background of Mordechai, who Mordechai was and who Haman was, we can understand Mordechai is now the descendant of King Shaul, coming to rectify something that King Shaul did wrong. What did he do wrong? He failed to kill King Agag. He failed to destroy Amalek. Now his descendant is Haman. Now Mordechai, who is a descendant of King Shaul, is coming to rectify this mistake against Haman, the descendant of Amalek. Where does it all start? Where do all the problems of the Jewish people in Persia start? By these words, by the fact that Mordechai refuses to bow down. Refuses to bow down. Now, Rishon LeZion, source number 10. Moving on. Rishon LeZion, which is a work authored by the holy Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Rabbi Chaim ibn Attar, who was a famous Moroccan rabbi of the late 16th and 17th century, and he has a very, very holy work, Or HaChaim, it's called HaKadosh, on the Torah, and he authors another book, Rishon LeZion, and that describes Esther. And he asks a very simple question. For those who know grammatical Hebrew, Lo Yichra v'Lo Yishtachave is talking about in the future tense.
What?
It's speaking about Atid. Lo Yichra v'Lo Yishtachave. He will not bow down. He will not prostrate himself. It should have said Lo Kara v'Lo Hishtachave. He did not bow down. He did not prostrate himself. Why is it talking in the future tense? So therefore, the Rishon LeZion, Or HaChaim, tells us something very fascinating. Mordechai, by the way, was also a cabinet minister. He was also in the parliament of the king. He didn't just not bow down to Haman. He stuck it in his face. He was very obnoxious about it. He was very open about it. It says, there's no English translation here, but I'm just going to read to you. Not just that he didn't bow down like everyone didn't bow down. He could have easily just said, he could have easily been tying his shoes every single time everyone was bowing down. I'm just tying my shoes. He could have been very, very inconspicuous. Every single time everyone was bowing their heads, he could have decided that he was looking the other way. But no. He would go all the way up to him and say, you see me? I'm not. Says the Talmud, says Medrash Rabbah, Mordechai, like every Talmud Chacham, it says halacha code of Jewish law. A Talmud Chacham, a Torah scholar, is not supposed to walk with his head all the way up. He's supposed to walk with the head slightly inclined, showing humility, subservience before God. It says Mordechai would always sit or walk or stand with his head slightly inclined, as every Torah scholar should. As soon as Haman arrived, he went like this, like he stuck his nose up in his face. In his face. Now, v'chol avdei hamelach, all the servants of the king would bow, and Mordechai would not. I'm going to skip for a second to source number 12, and then come back to source number 11. Verse 3, Vayoimru avdei hamelach asher b'shamach Mordechai, and the servants of the king that were at the palace gates said to Mordechai, Madua ata iver es mitzvah hamelach? Why do you disobey the king's orders? Source number 13. Vayihi ka'armam elav yom v'yom, they're saying to him day after day, v'lo shama aleim, he would not listen to them. Vayagidu lahaman, and therefore they said to Haman, Lirais, to see, hayamdu divrei Mordechai, they told over to Haman, look, Mordechai is not bowing down. They wanted to see whether Mordechai's resolve would prevail. Why? Ki gid lahem, because he told them asher hu Yehudi, that he's a Jew. 1 second, he told him he was a Jew? When did that happen? The ministers, they were telling him day after day after day. There's a lot to talk about over here. I'm going to try to squeeze it. I'm going to try to squeeze this as best as I can. Targum Sheni, which is the only commentary over here that gives us a huge background to the story. Very, very fascinating. Tells us the ministers were coming over to Mordechai and saying, you know, what is this? Why are you any better than us? What puts you better than us? So Mordechai told them back, why? Because I worship God. I cannot bow down to anybody else. Targum Sheni says, interesting dialogue. Mordechai starts telling them about the cosmos, the constellations, the creation of the world, and all the sequence, and etc., etc. And he basically concludes to them, he says, there is absolutely no way that I can bow down to anybody else. What was the real problem with bowing down? What was the real problem bowing down? The real problem was that Mordechai knew something about Haman. What was that about Haman? Because you ask yourself a question. Why was he being... We're going to get to that genealogy. The Targum Sheni tells us about the genealogy, which is very... and it connects it in, which is very fascinating. But you have to ask yourself about it. Why was Mordechai sticking his face in? Why was he being so obnoxious that he would not bow down? Couldn't he just look the other way? Couldn't he just disappear? And if it was really put pressure on him that he, as a cabinet minister, that he had to bow down to Haman or else, why didn't he resign? And just disappear? After all, he was the Rebbe. He was the leader of the Jewish people. And whatever he does, they follow. So why cause so much trouble? Why sticking your nose up? Comes along Esther Rabbah, which is Medrash Rabbah, source number 11. V'chi kantran haya. Why was he a contrarian that ignored the decrees? Ella, says the Medrash Rabbah, when Achashverosh decreed that everyone should bow down to Haman, Haman started, it says over here, he started wearing an idol, but according to some commentaries, chakak, he engraved, he tattooed an image of his idol, of his deity, on his chest. Haman. So now, now he expected that everyone should bow down to his God. His God? They should bow down to a God. Explain some commentaries, they go even further. Not only did Haman put an image of his own God on his chest, not only did he tattoo it, his purpose of tattooing it is that he started thinking of himself as a representative of divine powers. Now he wanted people to bow to him. Now he started thinking of himself as God. This was not something that was uncommon in those days, that the kings and leaders of those days somehow felt that they were a god. Nebuchadnezzar thought himself as a god. Pari thought himself as a god. The king, Haman, wanted people to bow to him as a god. On this He had to say no. But you mentioned genealogy. You just mentioned genealogy. So I want to say to you something, show you something very fascinating. They tell him, there's a whole dialogue that they're telling him. They ask him like this. So he says, Ani Mordechai v'amar lahen man isu desigid kadam avase. Now they says, I'm only going to bow to my God. I cannot bow to him. I cannot bow down to anyone but my God. So this is a dialogue he's having with the other ministers. It says, the ministers were speaking to Mordechai, It doesn't say what. Targum Sheni gives us the dialogue. They say to him, they were not fools. They were ministers. They were not fools. They knew the entire ancestry. They knew the entire history. They said to Mordechai, 1 second. You're not bowing down to Haman? 1 second. Loi kara avuch Yaakov kadam Esav? But your ancestor Yaakov bowed before his ancestor Esav. When did that happen? When Yaakov crossed over the river Yabok and encountered his brother Esav for the first time in over 20 years, and Esav wanted to kill him. What does it say in the verse? Yaakov prostrated himself 7 times. Aha! Now we understand why Targum Sheni went so far to show us that Mordechai was a descendant of Yaakov and Haman was a descendant of Esav, who both were a descendant of Yitzchak. Can you imagine? Haman was a descendant of Yitzchak. So they're asking Mordechai, you're not bowing down to Haman? Your ancestor did it to his ancestor. Your ancestor Jacob bowed down to Esau, to Esav. What makes you any better than your ancestor Jacob? How's that for an argument? So you know what Mordechai tells him back? Genius. Omar loin ana mizaris de Binyamin. He says, I am from Binyamin. You mistaken me. You mistook me. I'm from Binyamin. V'kad segid Yaakov kadam Esav, Binyamin lo yilud hava. When Yaakov bowed down to Esav, Binyamin wasn't born yet. I'm a descendant of Binyamin who wasn't born yet when Yaakov bowed down to Esav. So much so, he goes even further. And he goes so far to say, you know what? You want to know the reason why Binyamin wasn't born yet? So that he should not be born before Yaakov bows down to Esav. The whole reason why my ancestor Binyamin wasn't born yet was so that I should not be descendant of a person who bowed down to Esav. I will never bow down, and I learned that from my ancestor. What an answer Mordechai gives them. So you see over here, actions that we take upon ourselves has an effect on future generations. And sometimes, what gives us the courage and the guts to stand up to do what's right? Sometimes we can pull from our own heritage. Sometimes something that our ancestors had done 5 generations back, 10 generations back, that actually that implants some spiritual energy in us, some courage to do some things that were right. I'm going to say one more commentary on this verse, and then I'm going to try to give some background to finish off, to summarize, to recap, and to finish off. And you are welcome to see the rest of the sources and to understand it. Another thing that they say over here, very fascinating. The verse says, all the servants, they went over to Haman, lir'ais, to see, haya'amdu divrei Mordechai. Will the words of Mordechai prevail? Let's see. Is his words going to match? Is he not going to bow down? Why? Ki higid lohem, because he told them, asher hu Yehudi, that he is a Jew. Asks the Rishon LeZion, back to the Rishon LeZion, and also the Malbim, another commentary, asks this question. What is this, some kind of game? Is this some sort of game that he's playing around with him? I don't have it here. Is this some sort of game he's playing around with him? Let's see. A game of cat and mouse. He's going to bow, he's not going to bow. And let's see. We're going to tell him, and let's see who's going to win. Lirais hayamdu divrei Mordechai, whether the words of Mordechai will prevail. Meaning against who? Against the king, Who instructed that everyone needs to bow down to Haman? Ki chen tzivalei hamelech. The king instructed everyone to bow down to Haman. What kind of business is it? What kind of game is this that Mordechai is playing? His word against the king's word? Again, in a society where it's under complete rule of a monarch, where whatever the king says goes, you mess with the king, you're out. And let's see, who's going to win? Mordechai, a Jew, or the king? Who's going to win? What's going on over here? And what does it mean when it says in the verse, Ki higad lahem asher hu Yehudi, that he's a Jew? That this is the point. When did Mordechai say he's a Jew? In the verses, at least. So he tells us something very interesting. He says, you should know, there was absolutely no problem with religious diversity in those days. Nowhere in the Megillah does it ever say that the Jews were persecuted for their religion. There was freedom of religion. Sounds familiar? There was freedom of religion. The Jewish people lived in Persia, Babylon for 70 years. They were not, initially they were persecuted. But under the Persian rule, they were not persecuted. Achashverosh invited them to a feast. Ordered glatt kosher food. Made sure that everyone had the highest kosher standards. You can't say that there was no diversity. That there was religious intolerance. Not at all. And so, basically, the people were asking, the ministers over there were asking of Mordechai, you're allowed to not bow down to Haman. If you were to claim, why are you being so obnoxious? If you were to say even one time, I cannot say openly to the king, Your Majesty, I cannot bow down to Haman because I am Jewish, it's against my religion. Based on the story of the sequence till now, there should be no problem with that. Oh, religion? Okay, that's okay. You don't have to bow down to Haman because of your religion. It seems like it. So they're telling him, they're basically asking him, are you really not bowing down to Haman because of religion? Or do you have personal beef with him? Do you really have personal beef with him? Or is this about religious intolerance? Because if it's about religious intolerance, what exactly is stopping you from saying, I cannot bow down to Haman, it's against my religion? No problem with that. Do you have personal beef? They couldn't figure it out. So basically they're trying to figure out what is going to prevail. Is Mordechai's word that he is not bowing down to Haman because of his deity that he has on his chest, meaning that this is all about religion, is that going to prevail or is something else going to prevail? So now we appreciate when the next verse says, Vayar Haman ki ein Mordechai kirei mishtachave elei. Haman saw. He saw that Mordechai wasn't bowing down to him. What he saw. Well, what do you mean he saw? Well, he didn't see it until now? Well, the Bir Hagra actually says that his nose, he was such a stuck-up person, his nose was so high up in the air, he didn't even notice anything. You know, like you have some leaders that when they shake your hand, they make you feel like you're the center of the universe, and then you have some leaders that when they shake your hand, they make you feel like they are the center of the universe. You know, you have Haman, who he felt like he was a god, he was the center of the universe. Well, he wasn't really looking at the common person, even to a cabinet minister. He felt himself so high up. But when he saw Mordechai, Vayimalei Haman Chema, he was filled with anger. His anger flared. Says the Rishon LeZion, he was convinced that what happened? Vayar Haman saw. Explains the Rishon LeZion something behind this story. Haman knew. So what did Haman do? He knew Mordechai wasn't bowing down to him. Now Haman was told by the advisors, he was told by the other cabinet ministers, Mordechai doesn't want to bow down to you. Now we don't know whether it's because of religion or whether it's because he's got personal beef. We don't know. That's what they told Haman. So Haman says, you know what, I'm going to do the ultimate litmus test. He comes out, he sees Mordechai. Mordechai doesn't bow down to him. So Haman says, I know. He removes the image off his chest. This is what Rishon LeZion says. He removes the image off his chest. Okay. It's no longer about religion now. Mordechai still doesn't bow. Why not? What was the real reason Mordechai didn't bow? Because Mordechai was thinking to himself, there must be something under the shirt. So a person who thinks of himself as such a god, it's not just hanging something there. There must be something underneath. And, based on the Medrash, he was tattooed. So he felt there's still something religious. But what did Haman see? What did Haman see? He saw Mordechai wasn't bowing down to him even though he took his image off his chest. He's got personal beef. Haman now is flared up in anger. By the way, did Haman ever go over to Mordechai and ask him, why did you really not bow down to me? If he only went over and spoke to Mordechai, maybe nothing would have happened. But Haman was so stuck up and was so arrogant and was so quick to get so angry. And I'm going to finish off with this. That Vayives be'enov, verse 6, which is over here, source number 19. Vayives be'enov. It says, it seems contemptible in his eyes. Isn't there a word in English, infigrid? Someone who thinks that everything is beneath him or her, like beneath. Vayives. Yeah, that too. Vayives be'enov. He felt it beneath him. He says, I'm not going to just get rid of Mordechai. That's beneath me. I'm going to take my anger out on one Jew. When they told him about the nation of Mordechai, Haman decided he's going to destroy all Jews from the young all the way till the old. What rationale is there? What did the baby do? It was just one Jew. And also, the Medrash tells us, Vayives be'enov, beneath him. Says the Medrash, let's go back in time. Where else do we have this Vayives? Vayives. Where do we have this word Vayives and was beneath? By Esav. Vayives Esav es habechayra. Esav, he spoiled. He messed around with the firstborn rights. So, I know there's so much. I want to add one more point. They told Mordechai each and every day to bow down to Haman, and he refused. Says the Medrash, where else do we have this concept of yom yom, day by day? Yosef. Where do we have this? When the wife of Potiphar, look up the story, when the wife of Potiphar was trying to seduce him, it says, and she came to him yom yom, day by day, trying to seduce him. So here, Mordechai and Yosef both had challenges, similar challenges, where they were being pressured day by day to give in. Yosef almost lost. Comes Mordechai, but he prevailed. And now, his brother's descendant, Mordechai, after all, they come from the same mother, Rachel. So now another descendant of Rachel is being faced with the same challenge, but through the power of Rachel, who is the matriarch of both Yosef and Mordechai, now he gets that courage to stick it, even though he is being pressured day by day. Let me finish off explaining what is behind this irrational behavior of Haman. He went from assuming that a Mordechai is not bowing down to him because he's got personal beef, when really it's about religion, and he decides to take it out on all the Jews. What's the rationale behind this? There is no rationale behind this. And so quickly, one incident, a Jew doesn't bow down to him, and he decides to enact the final solution. We're talking about literally annihilating every Jew on the planet. Whoa! Drink some Kool-Aid. So I'm going to finish off with this. And that is a Hasidic discourse. I'm going to connect Talmud with Hasidus. Hey. Because it's all Torah here. It's all Torah. There's a Hasidic discourse given by the Rebbe on Purim, 1955. Tashon Tezvav. And the title is Reishis Goyim Amalek. That Amalek is the first of all nations. He says something very fascinating. Vehine. If I add it. Vehine. And he says, God created the world, creating two opposites. Everything has opposites, counterparts. There's good and evil. And every divine positive energy is created with a counterpart of a divine negative energy. Always. Every single creation in this world. Every single being in this world. And just like you would have in the lower, there are 5 levels of the soul, even the highest, even the most refined of all things that are holy has to have a counterpart. Now, listen to what the Rebbe says. It says about Amalek, the nation of Amalek, that chutzpah, the quoting a Talmud Sanhedrin, page 105, side 1, Kufhei Amud Aleph, chutzpah v'gava b'lei taga. They are a nation that is chutzpah. They are, how do you pronounce it? Chutzpah is now in the English dictionary. But what is chutzpah?
The nerve.
People with a nerve.
Nerve. And v'gaiva and haughtiness, b'lei taga, without meat, without any substance. And the Rebbe goes on to explain. Because there are 2 levels in haughtiness, in self-centeredness. There's gava sheyesh la'avana v'seichel. There is haughtiness that comes from rhyme and reason, and then there's haughtiness without. There are some people that say, because I run the fastest, therefore I'm the greatest. Because I know so much, therefore I'm so smart. Because I am a king, therefore I'm the most powerful. Because I have so much money, I'm rich, I'm powerful, I'm the best. To the point that they think of themselves even as a god. Like Parai. He was a king over the land, he was a very wise person, and he thought himself as a god. At least his rationale, at least it was coming based on some sort of rationale, albeit even in a subtle way. There was something that he was connecting it with. Something connecting it with. So when you have some people, you read it in the news, you see it in Hollywood, you see it in sports players. Sometimes the best players, and they let you know, I'm the best. They flash everything before you tell I'm the best. So that's one level. At least they have something that they are drawing it to. Even though everything obviously is false. Everything that we are given is a gift. Nothing really is ours. Even when we try to use our minds, it's only God's gift that's allowing us to grasp something, that's allowing us to push further, that's allowing us to achieve. Everything is a gift from God ultimately. But the haughty person thinks that's from him. It's my doing, my hands that created this. Okay. But at least that's something to deal with. Because that person has some sort of rationale to base it off. But then he says, then you have a different type of gaiva, a different type of haughtiness. And this is shehi ba'ofen shel dal geya, false or poor arrogance, meaning arrogance with nothing to base it off of. Nothing to base it off of. Meaning you look at that person like a complete idiot, complete fool. Why are you being so arrogant for? Who are you already? Perhaps we've met a person, 1 or 2 people in our lives, maybe. Who are you to become so arrogant? What do you got already? What do you have to bring to the table? And suddenly you're such a big shot. Who is the first to introduce to us this concept of haughtiness without any seichel, without any rationale? Amalek. Why? When did Amalek appear on the scene? When did they first appear on the scene? The Jewish people had just crossed the Red Sea. You can imagine, the nations of the world were terrified to come within a radius of 100 miles of the Jewish people. No one dared lift a finger. And suddenly, Amalek, we're going to start up with them. Who's Amalek already? Who are you? They show this arrogance. And the arrogance is based off such chutzpah, as we call it. Such nerve that they start up with the Jewish nation when they were at their climax. When they were all powerful, no one wanted to touch them. So the Rebbe explains that we understand Haman. Haman is a descendant of Amalek. So Haman had very irrational thinking. He was a big shot. But as we said, as we started off the class explaining, how was he promoted in the first place? Not because of his own brain. He wasn't a smart guy. It wasn't based on his own merit. He was an abuser. He abused his way to power. He rose up in rank only because of whom? Esther, Mordechai, right? All of these people. They're the ones that really gave him his rank. Without them, he's nothing. He would be back to Mamuchan, a backbench intern in the office. Intern in the office of a chief of staff of a congressperson. He would be all the way in the backbench. Where is he going all the way to becoming prime minister? Not because of him. And here he's walking around. I am a god. Oh, you do not bow down to me. I'm going to exact revenge on you. Enact revenge on you. Against you, against all the people, all the Jews, all you. Whoa. This irrational thinking comes from such a deep level of haughtiness, of self-centeredness, that only comes from a descendant of Amalek. Only comes from a descent of Amalek. And Bir Hagra actually tells us even more so. I just blinked out, I forgot what I was about to say. Anyways, so how do we fight that? How do we fight that? Again, we're going to finish. So how do we combat this type of behavior? Well, God put the refuah, the remedy, before giving the strike. What was the remedy? The fact that who was in place? Who did God put? The puzzle pieces, the chess players. Who was put in place before this whole entire episode began? Hashem put Esther as a queen, and put Mordechai as a minister, a cabinet minister, and Mordechai of all Jews. Because Mordechai, with his ancestral energy and courage given to him through his ancestors, through Yaakov, through Binyamin, through Benjamin, he was the one that is able to show when it was starting to go down, when things were starting to go down, he stood up to Haman and he says, I am a Jew. He told him, I'm a Jew. And I'm not going to say, I'm a Jew. I am a Jew with pride, and I am going to lift my head up, and I'm not going to give my head like this, and I'm not going to bow down to you. Now, as much suffering, as much as the Jewish people were scared for an entire year after that, ultimately, who prevailed? The Jewish people. And, as the Medrash says, another Medrash tells us, that when it comes to Risha'im, they rise up, God puts them at their climax right before He strikes them down. We say it on Shabbos, in Mizmor Shil Yom HaShabbos, B'froach Risha'im K'mo Esav, that God makes the wicked sprout K'mo Esav like grass, but then right away, Li Shamdam Adayad, right away, and He takes them down, and they drop very, very far down, right as they reach their climax. When Haman pointed the finger at Mordechai and says, I'm going to get you, personal revenge against you, as we see later on in the story of Purim, even after he decreed that all the Jews should be annihilated, he was still going after Mordechai. I'm going to get you. I'm going to follow you all the way to the end of the earth. Right when he did that, he was hung. He was hanged. So he met his downfall immediately. So the lesson for us, we have present-day Hamans out there in the world. We have present-day anti-Semitism. We have present-day people still calling for the final solution. But the approach of the Rebbe, as the Rebbe explains to us, the approach of the Rebbe is that we should be also the Jew who would never bow, who wouldn't bow. We must also be like Mordechai. We must get the strength from Binyamin to be able to say, me, I am never going to bow down.
Never be
Such a people, says the Talmud, Yehudi. Be a Yehudi, be a Jew. Says the Rebbe had a very unique approach, unlike many other leaders of his day, to say the approach of a Jew is to always stand proud and never to bow in submission, even to tilt the head or even to be apologetic. But when the nations of the world want to stand up and say, to build hatred for the Jew. And by the way, on chapter number 3, the Bir Hagra actually says that the biggest hatred of the world of ever is sinas hadas. Hatred of religion is the highest of any hatred. So when there's a hatred of religion, we need to be in Mordechai. We need to not be afraid to stand up and say, I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew. I'm very, very proud of it because I worship only one God. Elokah chaya v'kayama, as the Targum Sheni says. A living, an existing God. And I have so much to offer to the world. And rather than to be apologetic, I will show everybody what it means to be Jewish, what it means to be a proud Jew, and ultimately it's going to be Judaism that's going to prevail. All this we learned from Mordechai. So, in conclusion, let's all be that Jew that never bows. Let's all be proud of our being Jewish. And as we learn over the next series, next week and the week after, we learn about the royal face-off. We learn about all the different sequences of events that happen. We will see further along how A, it's the Jew that prevails, and B, we are learning continuous life lessons that are prevalent to us 2019 today. Let's stand up to all the Hammans out there in the world. I want to thank the sponsor for tonight's class. I want to thank everyone for coming today. I want to thank everyone for watching online. And God willing, stay tuned. Be back. Part 2 series next week, God willing. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.